She stepped off the creaking wooden boardwalk and into the dusty street. Well, if it isn't little Clara Beaumont, a woman called from the general store, her voice sharp enough to slice through the morning air. Clara's stomach tightened, and she kept her gaze fixed on the ground, forcing a polite nod. "You still wear those ragged shoes?" Another woman sneered, stepping closer, the nails of her hands tapping a rhythm of judgment against the counter. Clara swallowed and murmured, "They're fine, thank you." Her voice trembled. A boy darted across the street and copied her uneven steps. "Look at her walk. Watch your feet, Clara." He laughed, loud and cruel. Clara clenched her fists, hiding the sting behind a careful smile. "That's enough," she said quietly, but her words dissolved under the cacophony of laughter. From the stable across the way, Caleb leaned against the wooden post, his hat tipped low over his eyes. He didn't move, didn't call out. He only watched, her shoulders hunched, her eyes flicking toward him, but she quickly looked away, unsure whether the cowboy was friend or stranger. "You should leave, Clara," said a man at the livery, spitting to the side. "This town isn't for the likes of you." She bit her lip and nodded, stepping toward the creek on the outskirts. Her shoes kicked up the dry dirt, each step a silent protest. "You think you can just sneak away?" one of the girls called after her. "Ain't no hiding from us." Clara didn't answer. Her fingers brushed the frayed hem of her dress as she walked faster, the whispers following her like shadows. Caleb shifted slightly, moving from the post, his boots silent on the wooden boards. He adjusted the reins of a nearby horse, but kept his eyes on her retreating form. The creek was narrow, lined with reeds that swayed in the weak breeze. Clara sank onto a flat stone at the water's edge, resting her elbows on her knees. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, but it kept falling forward. Her chest heaved, a tremor she refused to let show. "Why do they always have to be so cruel?" she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. "They don't define you," a low voice said from behind. Clara startled and looked up. Caleb stood a few paces away, hands resting lightly on his hips, eyes steady and calm. I don't know what you mean," she stammered, unsure if she wanted the answer. "You're not what they say," he replied simply. "Doesn't matter how loud the town gets. They're words, they're empty." Clara's gaze fell back to the creek, water rippling around her fingers. She wanted to believe him, but feared it was just kindness she didn't deserve. "They'll follow you everywhere," she said finally. "Everywhere I go, they see me as a joke. Nothing more." Caleb crouched slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. "Let them laugh," he said quietly. "You walk straight, head held high. That's worth more than any whisper they make." Her lips pressed together. "It doesn't feel like it," she admitted. The words were fragile, like glass, ready to shatter under the weight of memory. He nodded, silent for a moment, watching her. "It will," he said finally. "One day it will." Clara glanced up at him, then back at the water. The reflection of sunlight danced across the surface, small, flickering points of light. She felt a strange, tentative comfort in his presence, though she would never admit it aloud. "I don't know why you care," she muttered. Caleb offered no answer, only a slight tilt of his hat and a look that seemed to say, "I do, and that's enough for now." The wind rustled the reeds, carrying a scent of damp earth and distant pine. Clara drew her knees closer, resting her chin on them. Her body relaxed just a fraction, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "You're not alone," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Not anymore, at least while I'm around." She let out a shaky breath. "I thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. It sounded like a prayer more than a statement. For a long moment, they simply sat. The creek babbled quietly, the sky above wide and pale, dust hanging in the air like a memory that wouldn't quite leave. Clara stared at the water, feeling the sting of ridicule soften into a dull ache, and the first flicker of hope took root. Caleb didn't move to leave. He didn't speak further. His presence alone was a shield, a quiet declaration that she was seen, even when the town refused to see her. And for the first time that morning, Clara allowed herself a small, cautious smile, the kind that did not hide tears, but embraced the faint warmth of kindness that had found her in the dust and whispers of a cruel town. She sat by the creek, knees drawn close, the frayed shawl slipping through her fingers. Water rippled over smooth stones, carrying reflections that trembled with her thoughts. "Why does it hurt so much?" she whispered, voice trembling. "You mean the words?" Caleb's voice came softly from behind. She jumped, then saw him standing quietly, a loaf of bread tucked under his arm. Yes," she admitted, glancing up, unsure if she wanted comfort. "They laughed at me, at everything I am." He sat a respectful distance away, placing the bread beside her. "Words are loud. But loud doesn't mean true," he said. His eyes held steady, calm, like the creek before dawn. She stared at the bread. "Why would you bring this to me?" Her voice wavered. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he replied. "You're alone, tired, carrying more than most around here. That's enough reason." Her fingers trembled as she reached for the bread. "People, they make fun of how I look. My clothes, my hands, my everything." Caleb nodded. "I've seen it before. You can let it hurt you, or you can let it pass through." "I don't know how to let it pass," she murmured. She drew the shawl tighter around her shoulders, fingers clutching the worn fabric. "Everywhere I go, they see only what's wrong with me. Nothing else." "They don't get to decide that for you," he said gently. "Not anymore." Her eyes rose to meet his, searching for doubt, finding none. "It feels impossible," she admitted. "Impossible to face them tomorrow or the day after." "Then take today," he replied. "One day at a time. One moment at a time." A sudden rustle in the reeds made her flinch. Do you think they'll try to stop me from going to the fair?" Caleb's expression hardened slightly, his jaw tightening. "Some will try. They don't like seeing anyone they've marked as less move freely." I can't let them win again," she whispered, gripping the shawl as though it were a lifeline. "I'll be humiliated if I go." "Then you'll go prepared," he said. "With your head held high, not hiding. You'll walk in like you belong. You do belong." She shook her head, disbelief flickering in her eyes. "Belong? I've never felt that before. Not once in this town." "Maybe it's time you do," he said quietly, voice like gravel softened by warmth. "Belonging isn't what they say about you. It's what you say to yourself." Her lips pressed together, eyes fixed on the rippling water. "I've always wanted just a little kindness. Just someone to treat me like a person." "I can offer that," Caleb said. "Not because I owe you, not because it's my duty, but because it's right." She glanced up, unsure if anyone had ever spoken so plainly to her, without mockery or hidden insult. "You're not afraid of them?" Caleb shrugged slightly. "Afraid doesn't help anyone. You do what's right, even if it scares you. That's courage." Her stomach tightened, fear mingling with something like hope. "And if they hurt me again?" "They can try," he said softly. "But they won't find what they're looking for. Not with you prepared. Not with you standing tall." The breeze rustled the reeds again, carrying the distant sound of the town waking to another dusty morning. Clara hugged the shawl closer. "Do you think anyone else sees me that way?" "Some might," he said. "But the ones who matter will. Not now, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. People notice honesty, strength, quiet dignity." Her fingers tightened on the shawl, warmth from the fabric reminding her of long-gone arms of her mother. "Quiet dignity," she repeated, almost tasting the words, letting them settle inside. "You'll find it here," Caleb said. "Or maybe you'll carry it with you wherever you go." "I don't know if I deserve it," she said, voice small, almost lost in the sound of water. "You do," he insisted. "Every person deserves it, even if the world tries to take it away. Don't let them." A shadow passed across the creek, and Clara's pulse quickened. She peered into the trees, spotting townsfolk moving toward the fairgrounds. Laughter carried faintly, harsh and mocking. "They're planning to stop me," she said quietly, fear creeping back. Caleb's gaze sharpened. "Then we'll make sure you're ready. You'll go, and they'll see you as you are, not as they want to imagine. Her eyes filled with a fragile spark. I'll try. If you stay near. I'll stay, he promised. I'll be nearby. Not to fight for you, but to remind you you don't have to face them alone. Clara pressed her hands over the shawl, her chest rising and falling with the weight of cautious hope. For the first time that day, she let herself believe that she might not be entirely alone in a town that had only ever whispered cruelty. The sun crept higher, casting long shadows across the creek. She looked at Caleb, the calm figure in the morning light, and dared to imagine a day when whispers would carry no power over her. And for a moment, the heavy dust of the town felt distant, almost forgotten, replaced by the quiet strength of a man who had no reason to care, and yet did. Clara stumbled down the dusty path, her cheeks still burning from the laughter in the town square. "Why do they always have to humiliate me?" she muttered, brushing dust from her skirts. "You ran far enough," a calm voice said. She froze, then turned. Caleb stood at the edge of the path, the sun casting a shadow across his face, hands resting lightly on his belt. They laughed at me," she whispered. I can't face them again today." "You don't have to," he replied. "Not today. Come with me. There's a place you can rest." She shook her head. I don't know you. Why would you help me?" "Because it's right," Caleb said simply. "You need shelter. That's enough reason." Her eyes flicked toward the ranch. A modest barn sat on the edge of the property, its wood worn but sturdy. "A barn?" she asked, suspicion curling in her chest. "It's more than it looks," he said. "There's a guest room above. You can stay there." She hesitated, the sting of embarrassment still sharp. "And you won't laugh at me?" Caleb's lips pressed into a thin line. "Never. Not here." Finally, she nodded, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. They walked in silence. The barn smelled of hay and leather. Horses shifted in their stalls, snorting softly. "You can take that room," Caleb said, gesturing to a small stairway leading upward. "I'll leave you be, mostly. Just settle in." Clara climbed the creaking steps carefully, feeling the unfamiliar warmth of being invited rather than mocked. She set her few belongings on the bed and turned to leave. I should thank you," she said softly. "You don't have to," he replied. "Actions say enough." The next morning, he handed her a brush and a bucket. "The horses need feeding. Start with the brown mare." Clara's hands shook, but she obeyed, brushing the animal's coat until it gleamed. I haven't done this before," she admitted, her voice low. "You'll learn," Caleb said. "Just take it slow. Pay attention. The animals respond to patience more than skill." Hours passed in quiet routine. She mended fences, swept the barn, carried water. Caleb spoke little, watching her quietly, occasionally handing a tool or tightening a loose plank. Every gesture was respectful, never condescending. "You're different from everyone else," she said during a break, wiping sweat from her brow. "How so?" he asked, adjusting the bridle on a horse. You don't treat me like I'm nothing," she said, words faltering. "Everyone else they mock, they shame, you just help." Caleb shrugged slightly. "Helping doesn't cost anything. Cruelty does." She looked down at her hands, calloused and stained with dirt. I'm not used to this. To being treated kindly." "You'll get used to it," he said, handing her a warm blanket in the evening. "You deserve warmth as much as any other person." She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, the soft wool brushing against her arms. I don't know why anyone would do that for me," she whispered. "Because someone has to," he said simply. "Someone has to see you for what you are, not what they think you are." That night, she lay awake in the guest room above the barn. The wind whispered through the cracks in the walls, rustling the hay below. She listened to the soft creak of the barn doors as horses shifted in their stalls. I feel safe," she murmured to the darkness, voice barely audible. For the first time. "You are," Caleb said from the doorway, his figure a quiet shadow in the dim lantern light. "Safe here. No one can reach you in this place." Her eyes flicked toward him, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, then left silently, the sound of his boots fading down the stairs. She exhaled, sinking deeper into the blanket. Outside, the prairie stretched wide, the horizon glowing faintly with starlight. The wind carried the scent of dry grass and earth, mingling with the warmth of the barn. She hugged herself, letting the tension of the day ease slowly, allowing the first fragile threads of trust to form. Maybe I can face tomorrow," she whispered, staring at the dark beams above her bed. The fear of the town lingered, but beneath it, a quiet hope began to bloom. She shifted on the mattress, pulling the blanket closer. Every sound, the horse's soft breathing, the creak of wood, the distant sigh of the wind, felt like a promise. A promise that she might not be entirely alone, not while someone like Caleb watched quietly, with patience and care. And for the first time in days, she let herself imagine a life where she could exist without ridicule, where she could take small steps, feed a horse, mend a fence, and still be treated with respect. The barn doors swayed gently, the wind carrying distant echoes of the town she had left behind. But in this small, quiet place, the world felt less cruel. She closed her eyes, letting sleep come, a thin smile forming as she finally felt safe. The lantern swung gently from the hook above the table, casting warm circles of light across the rough boards. Clara stirred the stew, careful not to let it spill. "Is it supposed to smell this strong?" she asked, brow furrowed. Caleb chuckled softly. "It'll taste better than it smells. You'll see." She glanced at him, surprised at the humor, then nodded. I've never cooked like this before. Usually, it's just me and cold bread." "That's no way to live," he said, flipping a piece of meat over the pan. "Food's meant to be shared. Stories, too." Clara hesitated. "Stories?" He leaned back slightly, wiping his hands on a rag. "Land's older than any of us. Families come and go. Hard times pass through. You learn or you break. That's all there is." She stirred the stew slowly, listening. "Did your family break?" "No," he said simply. "We struggled, yes. But we never gave up. That's different from breaking." Clara's hands tightened around the spoon. I don't know if I've ever really not felt alone." Caleb nodded without looking at her. Alone doesn't have to mean lonely. Some people choose to stay alone. Others find themselves surrounded without even noticing. You'll find which one you are. She looked down, stirring quietly. Outside, a sudden burst of laughter drew her attention. Voices harsh and mocking carried through the evening air. "What's that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly. "Townfolk, I'd guess. Don't let them hear you." "They're laughing at me, aren't they?" Her shoulders hunched, the familiar heat of shame creeping up her neck. "They might be," he admitted. "But you don't have to face them right now." She peeked through a crack in the barn wall. A group of townsfolk stood in the distance, pointing and chuckling. I can't stand them," she said, voice tight. "Everywhere I go, they make me feel small." "You're not small," Caleb said gently. "Not in this barn. Not with me here." Clara's fingers curled around the edge of the table. Why do you care?" "Because it's right to care," he said simply. "You don't need anyone's approval to be worthy." She swallowed, the warmth of his words mixing with the sting from the laughter outside. I'm not used to that. Not from anyone." Caleb moved toward the barn doors slowly. "Let's make sure they don't scare you." She watched him step outside, the lantern light catching the edges of his hat. He didn't shout, didn't call them out. He simply stood, tall and calm, between her and the sneering neighbors. His presence alone was a shield, silent and unwavering. One of the women from the group raised her voice. "Why is she even here? Doesn't belong anywhere." Caleb shifted slightly, letting the wind carry his quiet but firm reply. "She belongs wherever she wants. Leave her be." The woman's words faltered. The others glanced at Caleb, uncertainty creeping into their expressions. He said nothing more, simply held his ground. The barn doors creaked as Clara breathed out slowly, the tension in her chest loosening. "You see," he said, returning to her side. "Not all men in town are cruel." Clara's eyes followed him, disbelief and gratitude mingling. I didn't know that could exist." "It can," he said. "It's quiet, often unnoticed, but it's there. You'll find it if you look in the right places." She turned back to the stew, her movements slower now, less tense. I think I understand," she said softly. "Kindness doesn't have to be loud." "No," he said. "And cruelty doesn't have to be quiet either. You'll see both, but remember which one to carry with you." Clara's fingers hovered over the spoon. I want to carry the right one." "You already are," he said. His tone was calm, not boastful, simply certain. The lantern flickered as a breeze rustled through the barn. Clara inhaled deeply, the smell of cooking and hay grounding her. Outside, the laughter had faded. The town had retreated, leaving only quiet shadows. She exhaled, the tension of the day melting into something lighter. Maybe I don't have to fear everyone," she said, almost to herself. "No," Caleb said. "Just the ones who prove themselves cruel. And even then, you don't face them alone." Clara nodded slowly, her gaze drifting to the dim outlines of horses in their stalls. I can learn to trust again," she whispered. "That's all it takes," he said. "One moment at a time." The evening stretched on, shadows dancing across the barn walls. Lantern light shimmered over pots and pans, over hay and worn wood, over a woman beginning to understand that not every hand raised in judgment carried malice. "I thank you," she said quietly, eyes softening, "for standing there, without yelling, without anger." Caleb shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Sometimes quiet is enough. She rested her hands on the table, chest lighter than it had been in days. The night carried the distant hum of crickets and the faint scent of prairie wind. For the first time, she felt the tiniest spark of safety. And in that spark, she began to imagine, just imagine, that not every man in the town was like the one she had fled from. Some could be quiet, steady, honorable. Some could be a reason to hope. The morning sun painted the prairie gold as Clara tightened the straps on her worn boots. "I've never saddled a horse before," she admitted, voice tight with nervousness. "You'll manage," Caleb said, steady and calm, adjusting the reins on the brown mare. "Watch how I do it first." She studied his hands, the way he moved with quiet confidence, then mimicked him. "Like this?" "Exactly," he said, nodding. "Good. Keep your back straight. You'll balance better that way." The mare snorted, shifting her weight. Clara froze for a moment, heart hammering. She's heavier than I imagined." "She's strong, but gentle," Caleb replied. "Respect her, and she'll respect you." She mounted carefully, feeling the horse rock beneath her. I think I can do this," she whispered. "You can," Caleb said. "I've seen determination before, and you've got it." Hours passed in a rhythm of work. She carried water to the animals, brushed their coats, and mended fences under the broad sky. Caleb said little, only offering a hand when a plank wobbled too much, or adjusting a strap that threatened to loosen. His silence was steady, a presence that allowed her mistakes without shame. "Clara," he said at one point, handing her a hammer, "don't rush. Patience does more than strength." She nodded, gripping the tool tighter. "Patience, I'm not very good at it." "You will learn," he said simply. "Everything worth doing takes time." By late afternoon, dust clung to her hair and the sleeves of her dress. She paused, letting her hands rest on the fence post, inhaling the warm, earthy scent of hay and leather. The prairie stretched wide around her, the horizon blending into orange and violet. "It's beautiful," she murmured, letting her gaze linger on the sunset. Caleb watched her quietly. "It is," he agreed. "And it's yours to see, no matter what anyone else says." She turned toward him, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "Even if they laugh again?" "Even then," he said, voice firm. Their laughter doesn't change the land. It doesn't change you. Her fingers brushed the fence post, feeling the rough wood beneath her palms. I'm trying to remember that, she said softly. Trying to remember that I can matter. You do matter, Caleb said, watching the way her shoulders squared just slightly. Even if no one else admits it. She let out a small breath. I've been so careful not to draw attention. Always hiding. You don't have to hide here, he said. Not anymore. This land, these horses, they accept you as you are. Later, she carried feed to the chickens, humming softly under her breath. Caleb leaned against the barn door, arms crossed, eyes following her every movement. You're learning fast, he said. Learning, yes, she replied, tossing the grain into the pen. It's different than the town. Less cruel. Less heavy. Caleb smiled faintly. Different doesn't mean easy. But it's worth it. You're worth it. The next day, as she carried water to the cattle, a familiar murmur of voices drifted over the fence. She froze. Do you hear that? She whispered. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Town gossip, he said quietly. Curious about the festival coming up, no doubt. She clenched her fists. I don't want to go back there. I can't face them again. You might have to, Caleb said. But you can choose how you face them. You can walk in with your head held high. They won't dictate how you feel. Her stomach twisted. I don't know if I can. You can, he said gently. One step at a time. That's all it takes to reclaim yourself. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the open plains. Clara paused on a hill, feeling the wind lift her hair. She inhaled, tasting the dust and freedom of the prairie. Maybe I can, she said. Maybe I can face them. Maybe I can go to the festival. Caleb nodded, silent but steady. Courage doesn't mean you aren't afraid, he said. It means you move forward even when fear is there. Her fingers brushed the fence post again, feeling the grain of the wood, grounding herself. Then, I'll go to the festival, even if I'm scared. That's the first step, he said. You take it and the rest will follow. She turned back toward the barn, watching the horses shift in their stalls, the sky deepening into violet and gold. Dust clung to her skin and hair, but she felt lighter somehow, as if the prairie itself had lifted some of the weight from her shoulders. I think I can hold my head higher, she said softly, almost to herself. Even if they stare. Even if they laugh. You can, Caleb said. And you will. One day at a time. Evening fell, and she carried water back to the barn, chest rising with quiet pride. Caleb followed, adjusting the lantern so its light fell softly over her path. You've done well today, he said. Not just with chores, with yourself. Her lips curved into a small smile. Thank you for noticing. For being patient. It's nothing, he said. Everything worth noticing takes time. You've earned it. She paused at the barn door, looking back toward the town, distant and dusty on the horizon. I'll go to the festival, she repeated. I'll face them. I have to. You're ready, Caleb said simply. More ready than you think. She stepped inside the barn, the scent of hay and animals comforting, a reminder that strength could grow quietly, without applause. Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly, sun and shadow dancing across the open land. She inhaled, letting the moment sink in. Dust clung to her boots, hands, and hair, but her head held higher. I can do this, she whispered. Caleb didn't reply. He didn't need to. His steady presence, the quiet encouragement in his gaze, said everything. She had found a small measure of control, of confidence, and the first flicker of courage to face the world outside the ranch. For the first time, the town felt distant, its voices no longer as heavy. She could see herself moving forward, step by step, towards something more than ridicule, toward a chance at dignity among the dust and open plains. Clara stepped into the town square, her dress simple, clean, and mended from her own hands. Dust swirled around the wooden stalls and banners, carrying the smell of roasted meat and fresh hay. Here goes nothing, she whispered, her fingers tightening around the edge of her shawl. You'll be fine, Caleb said quietly from behind, his hat low over his eyes. Just walk steady. Hold your head high. I'm scared, she admitted, voice trembling. What if they laugh?
They might, he said.
But your courage is louder than their laughter. Remember that. A group of women snickered from near the bakery stand. Well, look who decided to show her face, one hissed. Clara's stomach tightened. She clenched her fists briefly, then let them fall. I'm here to help, she said softly, her voice barely audible over the festival noise. Help, a man behind the table snorted. What could she possibly do? She didn't respond, stepping toward a small table where a child had fallen, scraping a knee. Here, let me help you, she said, kneeling gently. Careful, Caleb murmured, watching her movements. Show them you can be steady. Clara dabbed at the child's tear-streaked face, cleaning the dirt. There, she said. All better now. See. The child's mother smiled faintly, a nod of approval. Thank you, she said softly. Some townsfolk glanced, eyebrows raised, murmuring among themselves. Clara straightened, dusting her hands, aware of every gaze. A woman whispered loudly, so the group could hear. She thinks she belongs here. She does belong, Caleb said softly, stepping just behind her. His presence was calm but firm, a quiet shield against the whispers. The mocking laughter grew, a chorus of sneers. Watch her trip over her own feet, one voice jeered. Clara inhaled slowly, letting the sound wash over her rather than pierce her. I can manage, she murmured, moving to another stall to help prepare refreshments. Her hands shook slightly, but she worked steadily, placing pies and mugs of cider with careful precision. Caleb watched her, eyes unwavering, his silence more reassuring than words could be. Keep steady, he whispered when she looked up briefly. One of the rival women, tall and sharply dressed, approached, a cold smile on her face. You think you can just show up here? You don't belong, she hissed. Clara's lips pressed together.
She didn't step back.
I may not belong in your eyes, she said quietly, but I can do what needs to be done. The woman leaned closer, voice dropping to a hiss. You're nothing but a joke. Mark my words, you'll embarrass yourself before the day ends. I'll see to it that I do what's right, Clara replied, meeting the woman's gaze without flinching. Caleb shifted slightly, his presence a quiet warning behind her. The woman glared, then stepped back, the crowd murmuring uneasily at the tension. Clara returned to her tasks, carrying pies to the long tables, offering a steady hand to anyone who needed it. A few townsfolk nodded, approving, some silently, others with faint smiles. It was small, but it mattered. See, Caleb said quietly, watching her. You're steady. You're capable. You're showing them who you are. I feel different, she admitted softly, brushing flour from her hands. Like I'm part of this, even if they don't want me to be. You are, he said, whether they like it or not. The sun dipped lower, and the festival lights flickered on, lanterns swaying in the evening breeze. Clara moved among the tables, carrying drinks, helping children, and offering a quiet word to those who needed encouragement. Each small action built her confidence, layer by layer, like bricks in a wall she was learning to stand behind. Careful with that cider, Caleb warned when a jug teetered. She nodded, steadying the pitcher. Thank you, she whispered. You're doing fine, he said. Notice it yourself, not just me. A sudden ripple of laughter erupted near the center of the square. Clara froze, recognizing the sound from the mocking crowd earlier. Her chest tightened, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she inhaled, hands steady, eyes forward. The rival woman returned, leaning against a post with a sly grin. Still pretending you belong, she said. I don't pretend, Clara replied, voice calm but firm. I do what I can. That's enough for me. A hush fell over the nearby crowd. Some whispered, some stared. Caleb's gaze remained fixed on her, unwavering, like an anchor in the storm. The woman scoffed, then turned sharply, realizing the power of Clara's quiet resolve. The sneers lost some of their edge as townsfolk began to murmur approval at her calm, dignified handling of the festival tasks. "You're different," a child said softly, handing her a small ribbon they had tied. Clara smiled faintly, tying it carefully to her shawl. "Yes," Caleb said quietly. "Different but strong. You see it too, don't you?" Clara nodded, looking out over the square. The dust, the lanterns, the faces. She felt the first real sense of control, a fragile but growing strength. I can face this," she said to herself. Caleb stepped back slightly, letting her stand in the glow of lantern light, a silent acknowledgement that she had earned it. The rival woman lingered for a moment longer, but the tension had shifted. Clara's calm, steady presence had taken power from mockery. For the first time, she understood that dignity wasn't about hiding or escaping humiliation. It was about facing it quietly, without letting fear dictate her actions. The lanterns swayed above, casting long, soft shadows across the square. Clara's hands were steady, her posture upright, her chest lighter than it had been in months. Caleb's presence remained close but unobtrusive, a quiet reassurance that she didn't face the world alone. I can do this," she whispered, watching a group of children laugh and chase one another through the square, the warmth of evening wrapping around her. "You can," Caleb said, voice low but certain. "You've done more than you know today." She allowed herself a small smile, finally feeling the weight of ridicule begin to lift. The festival noise carried on, but it no longer threatened to crush her. She had found a measure of strength, and it came not from avoiding the dust and whispers, but by standing within them, calm and resolute. And for the first time, Clara saw that facing the world, even a cruel one, could bring the first sparks of dignity, and that some quiet people, like Caleb, were steady enough to help her hold it. Clara held the envelope with trembling hands, the wax seal broken, the document inside crisp and official. This can't be real," she whispered, scanning the words. "It is real," the lawyer said, voice steady, patient. "The property has been in your name for years, though it remained unknown to the public. Legally, it's yours." Clara's eyes widened. "But the mansion? That big, old place on Main Street? The one she always bragged about." "Yes," the lawyer confirmed. "It belonged to your family's estate, and the title was never transferred. The court records show you as the rightful owner." Her hands tightened around the paper. I don't know what to do with this. I don't want revenge. She trailed off, voice cracking. Caleb, standing quietly in the corner, placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You don't have to do anything yet," he said gently. "Think it through. Decide what feels right, not what makes them pay." Clara looked at him, eyes shining with uncertainty. But all those years, the mocking, the whispers, she never knew. And now, "I could." "You could," Caleb said, voice low but firm. "Or you could choose a path that preserves your dignity. Justice doesn't need anger to be real." She exhaled slowly, folding the document carefully. I want her to understand, but not through cruelty. I want her to see truth, not spite." The lawyer nodded. "That's wise. You have the legal right, and you have the moral high ground. You can act in a way that shows strength, not malice." Clara paced the small office, heart racing. I've always felt so powerless in town. Always mocked, always the outsider. But now this changes everything." Caleb leaned against the doorframe, watching her closely. "Power isn't just about owning property. It's about knowing your worth, which you do now. The rest is secondary." She stopped, voice shaking slightly. "Worth? I think I finally understand it. Not just in the eyes of others, but in mine, even if they've tried to take it away for years." "That understanding will guide you," Caleb said quietly. "Do it on your terms. Quietly, confidently. Not for show, but because it's right." Clara folded the papers, tucking them under her arm. I'll go back to town.
Soon.
I need to see her reaction. But not with anger. With calm. You'll manage, Caleb said. And I'll be nearby if you need support. Her stomach twisted, nerves coiling like a rope, but she nodded.
I
I have to face her, eventually. The town, everyone, they've seen me as nothing. Maybe this will change that. You've already begun changing it, Caleb reminded her. With how you've carried yourself, even before this news. She looked down at the envelope again, the weight of truth and possibility heavy in her hands. I wonder if she suspects anything, she murmured. She's so sure she's entitled. So sure she's superior. And yet the law doesn't favor certainty or arrogance, the lawyer said with a small, approving smile. It favors fact, and fact is on your side. Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. I want her to see the fact, not the malice behind it. I don't want to feel angry. I want to feel calm, in control, like I finally belong somewhere. Caleb's hand brushed hers lightly. You do belong. Not because of a mansion, not because of a title, but because you've learned your value. Everything else is just acknowledgement from the world. She nodded, swallowing hard. Acknowledgement, yes. That's what I want. To be seen for who I am, not who they think I am. Exactly, Caleb said softly. And that's more powerful than anger or revenge. Quiet dignity will do more than ridicule ever could. She tucked the papers carefully into her bag, fingers lingering on the seal. I will go back to the town soon. But I'll do it on my terms.
Calm.
Not loud. Not cruel. Just true. You're ready, Caleb said, voice low and certain. More ready than you know. She paused, letting the thought sink in. I've been afraid so long. Afraid of being humiliated again. Afraid of being nothing. But now, she looked at Caleb, a faint smile forming, fragile but real. I think I'm ready to face them. To face her. And to stand as myself. That's all anyone can ask, Caleb said. Stand as yourself. The rest will follow. Clara inhaled deeply, the weight in her chest lightening slightly. I don't need to be loud to prove my worth, she said. I just need to be true to who I am. And you are, Caleb replied. Every step of the way. The lawyer cleared his throat gently. If you plan to take possession, remember, timing matters. You don't need to rush. Choose the moment that feels right, not the one that satisfies anger or curiosity. Clara nodded. I understand. I'll wait. I'll choose carefully. Calmly. Outside, the wind stirred the prairie grasses, carrying faint echoes of the town beyond. Clara looked through the office window, imagining the streets, the square, the mocking eyes of those who had doubted her for years. She didn't feel fear now, not fully. Instead, a quiet strength pulsed through her, steady and deliberate. I think I can do this, she whispered, folding her hands over the envelope. I can stand in truth, not malice. I can be myself, finally. Caleb's gaze met hers, unwavering.
You will, he said.
And when the time comes, it will speak louder than any laughter ever could. Clara let herself believe it, feeling for the first time the faint thrill of justice without anger, of dignity reclaimed, of power used without cruelty. The town, the mocking, the rival woman, none of it could diminish the quiet strength growing within her. And as she left the office, Caleb at her side, she realized that her worth had never depended on anyone's approval. The deed, the mansion, the recognition, they were merely symbols of what she had finally learned, that calm, patient, moral strength could outshine ridicule every time. Clara stepped onto the wooden platform in the center of the town square, her clean dress catching the late afternoon sun. She held her shoulders straight, hands folded neatly before her, eyes calm but steady. The crowd shifted, whispers rising as familiar faces recognized her. Well, look who finally decided to show herself, the rival woman said, voice dripping with mockery. Clara's lips curved into a faint, serene smile. I'm here for a simple reason, she said, voice carrying clearly across the square. To clarify something important about the mansion on Main Street, the one many of you have admired for years." The woman laughed, sharp and condescending. "And what is that? That you finally plan to clean it?" "No," Clara said, her tone quiet but firm. "The mansion has been in my family's name all along. Legally, I am the owner." The crowd froze. Murmurs rippled through the square, disbelief and surprise mingling in the dry, dusty air. "You what?" one of the townsfolk whispered, eyes wide. "The papers," Clara continued, reaching into her bag and lifting the envelope. "The deed has been in my possession for months. This is not about revenge, and it is not about anger. It is simply the truth." The rival woman's face paled, lips parting in shock. That can't be. You're lying." Caleb stood nearby, hat low over his eyes, hands resting lightly on his belt. His presence was calm, reassuring, a steady contrast to the rising tension. He said nothing, letting Clara's words carry weight without interference. "I assure you," Clara said, holding the document aloft, "this is official. I have no desire to humiliate anyone personally, but the truth must be acknowledged." A man muttered, She's serious." "Yes," Caleb said quietly, eyes sweeping the crowd. "She's always been serious. The difference now is that others are finally seeing it." Clara turned her gaze to the rival woman, voice steady, controlled. "Your words, your laughter, your mockery, they have no power over my worth. They never did." The woman's cheeks flushed, the first genuine sting of embarrassment crossing her face. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The townsfolk began to shift, murmuring among themselves, some nodding slowly in recognition of Clara's calm authority. You owned it all along?" a shopkeeper asked, voice shaky. "And we never knew?" "That is correct," Clara said softly. "The legal papers have been clear for years. I am not seeking revenge, but fairness. The mansion is mine." The crowd buzzed with astonishment. Faces that once sneered now held varying degrees of respect and guilt. Some avoided her eyes. Others studied her in awe. I suppose congratulations are in order," someone said quietly. Clara's smile remained calm, composed. "Thank you. I accept acknowledgement, not flattery. And I hope this serves as a reminder that dignity is never defined by the opinions of others." The rival woman backed away slightly, stumbling over her words. I always thought." "You assumed wrongly," Clara said firmly, voice unwavering. "Assumptions and mockery are not measures of truth." Caleb stepped a little closer to Clara, silent but protective, ensuring no one could move too close or provoke her. His quiet presence reinforced the moral contrast, cruelty versus integrity. I didn't realize," another townswoman said, voice soft. "I suppose we judged too quickly." Clara nodded, eyes sweeping the faces around her. "Quick judgments can wound deeply. But understanding, patience, and honesty restore balance. That is what I hope to achieve here." The rival woman's expression darkened, shame and disbelief clashing. She had ridiculed Clara for years, never expecting this calm confrontation. The town watched as humiliation finally visited the one who had caused so much of it. "You've won," the woman muttered, barely audible. Clara's gaze softened. "I did not win through malice, and you need not lose in bitterness. Truth, calmness, and moral strength carry their own weight. Let them guide you, too." Caleb nodded subtly, signaling the quiet assurance that Clara was safe, unthreatened. The woman looked away, cheeks burning, realizing for the first time what her own arrogance had cost her in the eyes of the community. I think I understand now," a young man whispered. "All this time, we mocked her, and she had more strength than any of us ever saw." "Yes," Caleb said softly. "Strength is not measured by noise, cruelty, or approval. It is measured by how you face the world with integrity, even when others are against you." Clara let out a long, quiet breath, feeling the tension drain from her shoulders. The town square, once filled with ridicule and judgment, now seemed almost still in reverence. She realized, fully, that her dignity had never depended on the opinions of others. I, I can finally feel free, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Free from the weight of mockery. Free to exist as I am. A few townsfolk stepped forward cautiously, offering quiet congratulations. We were sorry, one said. You need not apologize for understanding late, Clara said, her voice gentle. What matters is that the truth is recognized now. The rival woman slumped slightly, no words left to cast shadows over Clara's moment. She had been humbled publicly, and the moral balance had been restored, not through cruelty, but through calm, unwavering truth. Clara stepped down from the platform, envelope in hand, feeling a lightness she had not known for years. Caleb walked beside her, silent and supportive, the embodiment of quiet strength. You did it, he said softly. Not with anger, not with malice, but with dignity. Clara smiled faintly, letting the warmth of justice settle over her. I realized, she said, that dignity was never something anyone could take from me. It was mine all along. Caleb nodded, tipping his hat slightly. And now the town sees it too, whether they like it or not. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the square. Clara stood tall, feeling for the first time the true measure of her worth, unaided by mockery, untouched by fear, grounded in calm resolve and moral certainty. The townsfolk murmured, whispers shifting from disbelief to respect, as the woman who once mocked her looked away in shame. Clara's eyes met Caleb's briefly, a silent acknowledgement that she had found both justice and herself in the quiet power of truth. And for the first time, she felt fully empowered, knowing that her dignity had never depended on the town's approval, but on her own steadfast, unyielding strength. Clara returned to the ranch with Caleb, her shoulders lighter than they had been in years. The dust of the town square still clung faintly to her dress, but the weight of mockery had lifted. It feels different, she said softly, brushing hay from her skirt. Different is good, Caleb said quietly, leading her toward the barn. You earned it today. Every word, every calm gesture, it mattered. She paused at the stable door, watching the horses shift their heads and nicker softly. They seem happy to see me, she murmured. They've always known who you are, Caleb replied. You just didn't know it yet. As they finished chores, a group of children from the town approached, cautious at first, then smiling broadly. Miss Clara, one called, holding out a small, hand-carved wooden horse. Clara's eyes softened. Well, hello there, she said, kneeling to take it. This is wonderful. Did you make it yourself? Yes, the child said, eyes shining. We wanted to say, we're glad you're back. The other children echoed her sentiment, offering shy waves and small gifts, a bundle of fresh herbs, a basket of eggs, a painted rock. Clara accepted each, her heart swelling quietly. Thank you, she said gently. Your kindness, it means more than you know. Caleb leaned against the fence, watching her interaction with the children. You've grown so much, he said softly. Not just today, but over weeks of hard work, patience, and courage. I didn't realize it before, Clara admitted, how much even small kindness can heal. The town, it's not all cruel. There's hope, too. Caleb nodded. Hope has been here all along. Sometimes it just takes time to notice it. Later, as the sun dipped behind the rolling hills, they tended the fire together outside the barn. Clara fed logs carefully into the flames, the warmth and light grounding her. I like this, she said softly. The quiet, the steady routine, it makes me feel safe. You are safe, Caleb said, voice low and firm. And you deserve to feel that every day. Clara glanced at him, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. I never expected anyone to care like this, she said. Not with words, not with actions. You've shown me more than I thought possible. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly, eyes focused on the fire. It's not just me, he said quietly. It's all of this, the land, the animals, the quiet work. It gives you space to grow, to see your strength. I just walk beside it. She smiled faintly, letting the warmth of the fire mirror the warmth spreading through her chest. It's peaceful here. I feel like I can finally breathe. A child ran by, chasing a stray chicken, and Clara laughed, a soft, unguarded sound. I never thought I could laugh like this, she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You deserve to, Caleb said, offering a small, encouraging smile. You've carried so much for so long. Letting yourself feel is part of that strength. Clara knelt to help a smaller child gather spilled feed, hands brushing against theirs. Here, let me help you, she said.
See?
All caught. Thank you, Miss Clara, the child exclaimed, eyes wide. You're welcome, she said, feeling the first true sense of belonging in years. The ranch, the children, the animals, all part of a world that now accepted her without question. As twilight deepened, Caleb leaned back on the fence, watching the stars emerge one by one. Look, he said softly. The night sky steady, endless, quiet. It's good to pause and just take it in. Clara followed his gaze, the first stars glimmering in the clear western sky. It's beautiful, she whispered. Like it's always been waiting for me to notice it. You've earned the right to notice it, Caleb said quietly. And to enjoy it. Clara's hands rested lightly on the fence, the envelope containing the mansion deed tucked safely in her bag inside the barn. Everything feels softer, she said. The dust, the fear, even the memories. It's like the wind has carried some of it away. Some of it, Caleb said, a gentle smile in his voice. The rest stays as a reminder of your strength. You've faced it all, and come through. She glanced at him, eyes reflecting firelight and stars above. I couldn't have done it alone, she admitted. You weren't alone, he said softly. Not then, not now. And you never will be, if you don't want to be. Clara exhaled, letting herself relax fully for the first time.
Thank you, she said simply.
For everything. Caleb nodded, tipping his hat slightly. It's been my honor, he said. The ranch settled into quiet harmony around them, the gentle nicker of horses, the soft rustle of prairie grasses, the crackle of the fire. Clara felt the layers of tension, shame, and fear slowly dissolve. She could see herself in this space, fully, without the shadows of the past crowding her. Do you ever wonder, she said softly, if people can really change? Not just for others, but for themselves. They can, Caleb said, voice low, eyes reflecting the starlight. It takes time, and patience and courage. You've proven that already. Clara smiled faintly, letting the quiet settle over her. I feel like I can rest now, she said. Really rest and not worry about judgment or shame or fear. And you deserve it, Caleb said, voice warm. She watched the stars, chest rising and falling evenly, heart light. I think I can finally believe that, she said softly. Caleb stood quietly beside her, a steady presence in the night. No words were needed beyond the shared calm, the unspoken trust. The ranch, the stars, the quiet prairie wind, all bore witness to the small, unshakable peace that had finally taken root in her heart. For the first time in years, Clara felt whole. Clara stepped into the soft morning light, the prairie stretching wide and golden before her. She tugged lightly at her worn shawl, now neatly mended, the fabric carrying faint traces of past trials and small triumphs. It's beautiful, she murmured, brushing dust from her boots. It always has been, Caleb said quietly, standing a few steps behind her. His eyes scanned the horizon, calm and steady as ever. Sometimes you just need to see it with new eyes. Clara smiled faintly, gazing at the fields she had helped tend, the fences she had mended, the horses she had fed. I think I finally understand, she said softly. This land, this ranch, it feels like it belongs to me, and I belong to it. You earned it, Caleb said. Not with force, not with anger, but with steady hands, patience, and courage. Everything else followed. She glanced at him, cheeks coloring slightly. You stayed by my side through it all. Quietly. Without ever pushing. You didn't need me to push, he interrupted gently. You needed someone to respect your pace, to respect your strength. That's all I've done. Clara laughed softly, a sound that carried freely in the open air. I never imagined I could feel this calm, this certain. Not in the town, not anywhere. And yet here I am, finally at peace. You've always had it in you, Caleb said, voice low and warm. The calm, the patience, the dignity. The town, they only just caught up. Clara glanced back toward the distant town, the streets now quiet, the dust settling like a gentle veil. Some of the townsfolk waved faintly as she passed, hesitant at first, then with small, genuine smiles. Their faces reflected respect now, not fear or mockery. They're noticing me differently, she said softly. Not because I shouted, not because I forced them, but simply because I stood as myself. That's how it should be, Caleb said, eyes following hers. True recognition comes from strength, not spectacle. Clara bent to check the fire she had lit the night before. The lantern she carried now steady and functional, no longer a symbol of trembling uncertainty. Even the small things, the fire, the lantern, my boots, they remind me how far I've come. And you've come far, Caleb said. Every stitch, every chore, every quiet step, all of it led here. She straightened, dusting off her skirt, and smiled genuinely for the first time in months. I can finally enjoy this moment, she said. Not because I'm triumphant, not because others see it, but because I know my worth. Caleb stepped closer, shoulders relaxed, letting the soft wind carry the quiet warmth between them. And you do. That's the part that matters most. Everything else is just acknowledgement. Clara lifted her gaze to the horizon, the sun painting the sky in soft golds and oranges. It's like the land itself has welcomed me, she murmured. Every hill, every fence, every horse, it's home now. You've made it home, Caleb said softly. And you've done it without losing who you are. That's rare. That's strength. She reached down to adjust her boots, worn from long days of work, but steady and comfortable. Even these old boots, they've carried me through more than I realized. Every step, every stumble led to this calm. Caleb's eyes softened. Every step mattered. Every choice, every moment of patience that all brought you here. And you faced it all with dignity. Clara turned toward him, cheeks warming slightly, eyes bright. I never thought I could feel this sure of myself. That I could face the town, the people, the past, and still stand steady. You've done more than stand steady, Caleb said quietly. You've grown, and now others finally see it too. But more importantly, you see it for yourself. Clara took a deep breath, the open prairie filling her lungs, the wind carrying away the last remnants of fear and shame. I think I'm ready, she said softly, voice steady. Ready for whatever comes next. Ready to live without the weight of ridicule or doubt. And you will, Caleb said, tilting his hat back slightly, letting the sun catch his features. Whatever comes, you'll face it with the same calm, patient strength you've shown all along. She smiled, eyes fixed on the horizon, golden light spilling across the fields. The shawl rested comfortably on her shoulders, the boots grounded firmly on the earth, the lantern from the barn flickering faintly in the distance. Every symbol, every small object, carried meaning now, reminders of humiliation transformed into dignity, of fear transformed into hope. Look, she said softly, reaching for Caleb's hand. The horizon, it feels endless. Like there's room for everything I've ever hoped for. There is, he said, hand warm around hers. And we'll face it together. One steady step at a time. Clara let herself relax fully for the first time in years. Together, she repeated, a gentle smile spreading across her face. And finally free. Caleb nodded, silent but present, eyes fixed on the horizon alongside hers. The prairie wind moved through the grass, the horses shifted softly in the barn, and the ranch, a place she had helped build, care for, and claim, stretched wide and welcoming before them. Clara took a deep breath, heart light, and looked once more at the endless fields. This is home, she said softly. And hope that's finally here. Caleb squeezed her hand gently.
It's always been here, he said.
You just had to find it. Together, they watched the horizon, the sun rising higher, promising new days, new possibilities, and a life earned through courage, patience, and quiet moral strength. And in that golden light, Clara knew, truly, that her journey from humiliation to dignity, from fear to hope, had reached its most peaceful and powerful moment.